start throwing stuff, we get bored. Okay.
Tom, have you seen just pretty much the presentation?
Yeah.
You okay with it all?
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to really touch base with you. I've been a little bit tied up with Jason down there.
Had a lot of really
Yeah.
busy time of year. All right, what's the over-under for number of people?
125. That's the number of
Might be a little.
That's what we're shooting for? I'm on stage. I'm out of here.
My bed is on. My bed is on.
My grandfather was the bishop at the time, and he was in to dedicate the building. So while he was here,
Anybody want a water? We have to do it for a while. I can see their whole.
it's online. You gotta be on time, otherwise they hang up.
Straight up, guys.
He's doing the slides. Wow, you missed the deadline for that. Make it two. Increase the number of watchers.
God is good all the time. You know, as I stand here and look back there and see members of this great congregation filing in, I think of that hymn, "Oh, when the saints go marching in." The saints of God are marching in here tonight because after 203 years of amazing missional engagement in this world by First United Methodist Church, we are recalibrating for the next 2 centuries and more. Our forebears, just from my imagination, what they went through so that we may be here in 2024, required prayers, sometimes on their knees, sometimes in the closet, sometimes driving or walking or riding horseback, or just on the prairie somewhere. petitioning God to guide our steps. And so tonight we come. For some of you, it will be a strange phenomenon for us to gather like this. But I think it's a necessity that we know the status of our church, especially financially, because we can do something about it when we know. We will not be perfect tonight, but we will attempt to be true, because you need your leaders to be honest with you, and your leaders need you to step up like this congregation has done time and time again. So tonight, you will hear presentations from some of the leaders of this congregation. The focus will be mostly around funding, but don't forget that funding is just another way to state ministry. And our hope is that there will be some clarification, some deeper awareness, and some prayer, and then some action. And the action will be voluntarily, as it has always been. Many of you are the soldiers whose stewardship we will be reporting tonight. So I want to offer a word of prayer as we get started. I'm reminded of that hymn that says in one of his stanzas, "Brothers, sisters, we are treading where the saints have trod. We are not divided, all one body we, one in hope and doctrine, one in charity." Let us pray. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, pour out your Holy Spirit on us as we gather here tonight and guide this meeting to bring the honor, the glory, and the praise to your holy name and to the advancement of your kingdom of justice and righteousness here on earth. We ask these and many blessings in the precious name of Jesus, our Savior and Lord. Amen. Welcome to this town hall.
Yes, welcome and thank you for coming. I am Ann Littleton and I am chair of the Administrative Council and the Executive Committee of the church. Almost all of your leaders that will be presenting tonight were new to their positions in January. And at the January Administrative Council meeting every year, the chair of the Finance Committee submits a budget to be approved by the Administrative Council. We weren't aware that over the last 7 years, the budget far exceeded the revenue, thus depleting all of the operating reserves. There is good news, and the good news is the Finance Committee recognized the issue and have addressed it. They are addressing it by submitting a budget for 2024 that will be in line as much as possible with the projected income. This means it'll be $500,000 less than the 2023 budget, thus necessitating cuts to the operating costs and cuts to staffing. All the leaders have approved the budget, and all the leaders agreed that we needed to come before the congregation and educate you on what exactly is going on with the funding. We are trying to have The expenses fall in line with the incomes so that we can go into the future, into the bright future, with a fiscally sound church. Tonight, we have a wonderful turnout, and we have given you index cards when you came in, and anytime during the evening when you have questions, feel free to write your questions on the index card and send it to the middle so that people can pick them up on the middle aisle. If you need an additional card, put your hand up and they can provide you with another card. After the presentation, Karen is going to look at all the questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can here in the sanctuary. We may, because of time limitations, not be able to get to all of them, so please come to the fellowship hall afterward. You can talk to any of the presenters that are there with your questions and get some coffee and some treats. So now I'm happy to introduce Don McDonald, the current chair of the Finance Committee, and he's going to explain how the committees function and the different sources of income that the church has.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate the introduction. So I have 4 objectives in my piece of the presentation tonight. I want to go through the church decision-making bodies and how the church is split up to make decisions. I want to go through the understanding of the different sources of income and where the money comes from that funds our church. Then I'm going to look at our 2023 results, and then we're going to show you how we came to the budget in 2024, and I'm going to give you a little of the background on that. So I'm going to go through about 8 committees today of that helps the church make decisions and continues on. There's more committees than this, and we appreciate everyone that sits on a committee, but these are the committees I wanted to go through tonight and their primary function. We have the administrative council function that's chaired by Ann Littleton, and the vice chair is Tom Aubrey, and they're responsible for the overall governance of the church and running the church. They meet 4 times a year. So if you're on the administrative council, could you stand up so people can see who's on it? So, thank you. The executive committee is a subset of the administrative council, and it meets 12 times a year, and the whole purpose of the executive committee is to help make the decisions go smoother and make them on a more timely manner. Meeting 4 times a year with the admin council doesn't really help make quick decisions, so that refers some of the decisions back to the executive committee. The chairman of the executive committee is Ann Littleton, and the vice chair is Tom Aubrey. And if you're on the executive committee, if you stand up just so we can see who's on that. And it's made up primarily of staff parish relations, finance committee, the lay leaders, some trustees, missions, and that. The finance committee is overall responsible for the financial direction of the church and the finances of the church. We formally meet 8 times a year. We've probably been meeting more than that since last October to try to get the work through some of the issues and to balance the budget. But I'm the chair of the finance committee. Karen Mobley is the vice chair. And if you're here and you're part of the finance committee, can you please stand? Thank you. The Staff Parish Relations Committee is primarily the human resource committee of the church. It's responsible for working with the clergy, working with the staff, working through human resource issues. I think they've been meeting daily lately. And, I talk to Melissa a couple times a day sometimes lately. But Melissa Pierce is the chair of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. And if you're on the Staff Parish Relations Committee, can you please stand? Thank you. The trustees are responsible for managing the property of the church. The 2 church buildings we have in Birmingham and in Berkeley. They're also responsible for the parsonages we have ensuring that all the property is being used efficiently, that it's insured. Sharon Ulip is the chair of the trustees. And if you're on the trustees, could you please stand? Thank you. The endowment committee manages the endowed funds that have been given to the church from legacy gifts, and the grants are limited to 4% of the endowed fund at the previous month end. And Eric Freeberg is the current chair of the endowment committee, and if you're on the endowment committee, could you please stand? Thank you. Investment committee handles the investment to ensure that the investments of the church are handled in a prudent manner, that they're invested properly. In 2023, the investment committee made a decision. It was all done in-house to that point in time. And in 2023, the decision was made to go out and use a professional money manager. Bank of New York was chosen, and they've done a really fine job for us. Rob Graybill is the chair of the investment committee. And I didn't see Rob here. He might be here, but if you're, oh, thanks, Rob. And if you're on the investment committee, if you could please stand. And then missions has a huge role in our church. They're responsible for all the missions work. Bridget Skipper is the chair of that. I don't think Bridget's here tonight. I heard she was on a cruise. But if you're on missions or involved in missions, can you please stand? And then we have many other committees that I haven't mentioned tonight that make the church work. But these are some of the main ones that help us with the decisions of the church and keep the church functioning day to day. The finance committee, which I represent, is responsible for the overall finances of the church. We interact with the finance director quite regularly, Frank Turco, and we're lucky to have Frank with us. Frank's been with us for about 18 months. And he's responsible, but we work with him. The finance committee is responsible for the budgets, the income, and the expense side. We are responsible for the stewardship campaign that is done annually that drives a lot of our budgets for the church. We look at the expenses, the revenue, make recommendations back to ad council or executive council when we see issues, and work with Frank and the staff to resolve those issues. We coordinate with Staff Parish Relations Committee on any budget issues to make sure that we're being addressed correctly. And if Staff Parish has a question on how we should do something or vice versa, we interact with them quite regularly. We also work with the church staff to improve functions and see what we can do to make things smoother at the church. And we're also responsible for interacting with audit to make sure the audits get completed on a timely basis. So I'm going to get into the funding sources, and I really wanted to get into how the church functions and then the role of the finance committee, because I think it takes some of the mystery out of how decisions get made at the church and go forward. There's 4 primary funding sources that run our church. The first one is the ministry fund. It's also known as the general fund, and that's the day-to-day operations of the church. The second one is home fires. It's administered by the trustees, and that has to do with the capital improvements and taking care of our properties for the church. The missions is responsible for all the mission support. It's supported from the operating budget, but a lot of the funds that support missions get funded through special funding methods that go on during the year. And then endowment are generally legacy gifts that are given to the church. And there's 2 pieces to the endowment. There's the general endowment, and then there's the name fund endowment, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. So the ministry fund, I consider that kind of like the general fund of the church. It's the day-to-day of the church. It runs the church. It has all the clergy's salary, the staff's salary, all the salaries for the people that run the programs of the church. And that represents about 65% of the budget. Then we have the building and grounds responsible for the electricity, the lights, heating the buildings, minor repairs to the buildings, and plowing the snow, cutting the lawn. That represents about 18% of the budget. Then we have Christian education, youth ministries, high school ministries, worship and music, membership and hospitality, congregational care, which we're really focused on trying to improve going into 2024, outreach ministries with church and society, anything that the blood drives need help with comes through here. And then we got the ministry shares of the apportionment, which represents about another 17% of the budget. So if you're following with me, there's really 3 items here that make up a large chunk of our general fund budget. Salaries, the building and maintenance, and apportionments make up about 94% of all the expenditures that come through the general fund. Home fires is the capital fund. The trustees manage it. It's funded through the annual stewardship campaign as an additional line item. In 2023, the trustees spent about $392,000 to maintain the churches or fix things in the church. Things that were done in the last couple of years are air conditioning replacements, roof repairs, the floor in the CLC had to be replaced, handicap improvements at the church to comply with federal law, and some major plumbing upgrades. Missions giving, we're pretty lucky what we do at this church with missions. It's funded primarily through 4 separate areas. Partners in Mission, which I think there was an outreach last Sunday at the church to talk about funding for Partners in Mission. Donation to UMCOR, which is the National Disaster Relief that the United Methodist Church funds. Then we have the Women in Faith with our rummage sale, which generates close to $300,000 a year with the 2 rummage sales we do that funds missions. And then we have adult, youth, and mission trips, and special named endowments that are just for mission work. Currently, this church supports 21 different missions, and they're local, they're national, and they're global. Some of the local ones are Baldwin Center, Brightmoor, Cass Community. Some of the United States ones are Steedville, and then we do work with Haiti and Honduras. So I think we all should be really proud of the work that Missions has done to really support our church. Endowment are endowed funds that are given to the church to help the church out. Their legacy, and they're really helping us long term with it. There's 2 pieces of the endowment. There's a general fund endowment, and then there's the named fund endowments. And the general funds, there's very specific bylaws on what they can be used for. They can be used for things like technology upgrades. If we have new positions that the clergy or that we feel that the endowment will fund for a year, and they'll help fund some of the youth trips to England for the choir. The named funds are very specific. There's 15 of those. There's about $3.5 million in that, and those are where people have left specific funds to the church for named projects that they're very, very want to make sure that they're taken care of. And a lot of them have to do around with congregational care support, missions, clergy education, seminary support, and Christian education. So let's get into where we were in 2023. So for 2023, look at everyone's head, look at the screen, wow. We had revenue of about $2.8 million. That's a lot of revenue we brought in. But we had expenses of $3,060,000. So we had a loss last year of $288,000. Now, what really helped us last year and helped us in 2022, in 2023 last year, we had 7 families stepped up, and in the month of December, gave $225,000 to the church that we could use for the general fund. So if we didn't have that step up in the month of December, we would have lost somewhere around $425,000. So we really were lucky to have the 7 or 8 families step up in the month of December. In 2022, we made $112,000, but in December we had 10 families step up for $350,000 in the month of December. So that's kind of where the church is at. The Finance Committee has really talked at length about how much longer we can afford to really wait on and see if we get the December gifts. The problem we have is a lot of the people that have written the December gifts are aging, they're passing away, and they're moving into assisted living, and they don't have the same amount of discretionary funds to help the church out like they have in the past. So when we delivered or worked on the 2024 budget, we were really cognizant of that, and we talked about that a lot. See what is really a good revenue number that we should really shoot for going into 2024. So I want to talk about how the budget got developed, and I got to get a water here for a minute. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So when we went through, we started the budget in the May timeframe, and there was a lot of discussion on how we should do it. The unanimous decision in the Finance Committee, and there's about 20 people that sit on the Finance Committee, that we really needed to shoot for a balanced budget in 2024. Even in the month of May, we were looking at a loss for the year in 2023, and there were people that thought we should have tightened up spending in 2023 earlier than what we did, but that's water over the bridge, and we got to move forward. So we said we got to have a balanced budget. We also said we had to focus on 4 areas that the church really does well, or really things that people come to the church for. And those are worship and music. We do a great job at worship and music, and we wanted to make sure that whatever we did with the budget, that it's taking care of worship and music. We wanted to talk about, we had to make sure that we had something for children's, youth, ministries, and education. There's a lot of young families that we bring into our church because of our youth education, our youth music, our youth ministries. So we felt that was very key that we keep that. We also said this church is known for missions outreach, that we need to make sure that whatever we do, that we preserve missions outreach. And the last one is that we did an okay job, but we got to improve is congregational care. So as we look through the budget for 2024, those are 4 areas that we kept in our back burner all the time and said, we got to make sure we take care of those. We established the target for revenue, which drives everything else based off the estimate and giving and the stewardship campaign. And the 3rd weekend of the stewardship campaign was when we had our first meeting and talk about where we're at from the budget. And from the pulpit, it said that we were at $1,475,000 of income. You can see last year, our expenses were $3 million. We immediately knew we had to do something different. So the Finance Committee split off into 3 groups. 2 or 3 people said, we'll go talk to endowment to see if there's anything that they can help us with. 2 or 3 people said, we'll go work with the clergy, and we'll make some calls to people that haven't turned in their estimate of giving and their stewardship card yet. So with those people went off in that, and then 4 or 5 of us, along with lay leaders and Charles, went off and said, we'll work on the expense side of it. So the first expense budget we got back from the staff in October was $3.3 million. So you can see the gap that we're trying to work in the Finance Committee. We got revenue at $1,475,000, but we got the staff saying we need $3.3 million. So with what we were doing with endowment and what we were doing with the people calling people, asking them to turn in their pledge cards, we moved that up to, we finally ended the year with $1,977,000 in pledges. That's still less than the $2.5 million you'll see that we set the budget. So we said, okay, what is a reasonable amount to have for unpledged income in 2024? And we looked at what we did in 2023, 2022, and 2019. We did look at 2020 and 2021, but because of COVID, we decided 400,000 would probably be a stretch number for unpledged giving. And we also said we got to find another $100,000 someplace in miscellaneous income. So you add those pieces up, we came to 2.5 million in revenue. So we said, okay, 2.5 million. And there were people on the finance committee that said we're being too aggressive. The revenue number for 2023 should be $2.2 million, $2.3 million. We had other people, and I was getting calls at night at home going, just give us another 150,000, Don, move it up to 2.7 million. I know we'll get it, And I said, hey, we're not getting it this year, so what makes everyone think we're going to get it next year? So every meeting in November, October, November, December, we spent over an hour debating what's the right number for revenue. Finally, with a lot of work and a lot of analysis, we said 2.5 million is where we need to be. But now we still got to go work on the expense side. So we went back out to the staff. We asked them to look at what their budget should be for next year. They came back at 3.15 million, which was still a $650,000 gap from where we said we had to be from the revenue. So the group that's working on expenses came back, and I think we had it down to about 2.9 million. Charles says, I'm going to have an offsite with the staff, with Ann Littleton and Melissa Pierce, and we're going to go down to Berkeley for a day and come back. So they came back, it was $2.76 million. Still greater than our expenses. And in the December meeting, we had a lot of discussion about, okay, how do we want to handle that $250,000 gap that we've identified? There was part of the finance committee said, let's carry down a line item on the budget and we'll close it as the year goes on. Another portion of the finance committee said, no, we got to allocate that back so everyone feels the same amount so we know where it's coming from. A motion was made, it was passed unanimously that we were going to allocate that shortfall back across the total budget line to come to $2.5 million. So that's how the budget got developed for this year. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's how, we feel like we have a balanced budget for this year, and it took a lot of work. As you can see on the screen, we got 2.5 million in revenue, which is about 282,000 less than we had in 2023. But remember, 2023, we had 225,000 additional giving in the month of December that we said we don't know if we can guarantee that anymore. Then on the expense side, we were at 3,060,000 last year. We said 2,576,000 is where we need to be. So it's a $483,000 cut in expenses from where we were last year. So it's pretty harsh, but it's reality, and the Finance Committee unanimously approved this. We took it to the Ad Council in January, had a lot of discussion. A lot of stuff I just shared with you, we shared at the Ad Council, and it was approved unanimously by the Administrative Council that this is where we need to be in 2024. So, going forward, what are we doing? The Finance Committee is committed to a balanced budget going forward. We think it's the only way to operate the church. We can't guarantee that we're going to operate out of reserves. The Finance Director is committed to hold reviews with the staff to make sure that we stay on our budget. And if that doesn't work, then the Finance Committee and other members of the executive team of the church will meet with people and try to get us back on budget. We're going to continue to strengthen the financial controls up here and look for areas that we can save money and implement new controls. We're revamping the stewardship campaign for 2024 to try to increase the participation and to get more people involved. And we've been working with endowment on the side to see if we can change any of the endowment rules with congregation approval and future funding to help with the endowment, so there's some legacy costs there that can help with the operating budget going forward. And we're all looking for new opportunities of revenue for the church. so that we're not just dependent on the giving and the people in the congregation to continue to fund the church. But we need your help as we go forward. You know, we need prayers, we need presence, we need gifts, we need services, we need people to volunteer their time, to get involved, and to help the church grow. So it's a big ask, I understand that, but let me just say, getting involved in committees is really good. Why? This is a big church. You come to church, you sit in your section of the pew, and you might know the people around you. When you get involved in committees, you meet new people, you have new friends, and you have new opportunities to do things. So getting involved in committees is a great way to help the church out. Melissa.
Hello, I'm Melissa Pierce and chair of the SPRC. More than a year and a half ago, I joined the Staff Parish Relations Committee because I love our church and I really want to help it succeed. Oh, thank you. In talking with many of you, I confirm that we share the conviction, both personally and corporately, that Birmingham and Berkley First are important to us for building God's kingdom. During my conversations, I also contacted Reverend Chad Oyer, one of our former pastors. Chad's advice to our church at this pivotal time is the following, and I quote, "FUMC is a missional, not a maintenance-oriented church. The FUMC church family just needs to be aware that because of its missional presence, that the being of many lives are at stake. It's mission central for many outside of its walls. Everyone's gifts ensure that it continues to be a missional force in the area," unquote. You just heard Don's remarks about our church's economic circumstances. Overall, spending has exceeded our contributions for many years, and we no longer have any extra reserves to pay for budgetary shortfalls. In February, our church's Administrative Council, the Ad Council, unanimously adopted the church's 2024 budget for $577,000 less than the proposed budget. Personnel and benefits account for 65% of the operating budget, and SPRC is tasked to cut over $300,000 this year. Areas to cut have been identified. Contracts for utilities, including lawn care, snow removal, internet, phones, and copiers are being investigated to reduce costs. Custodial staff on Saturday has been eliminated, with the exception of weddings and funerals. Employees who are no longer with us will not be replaced. Each department has been given a budget and must operate within it. Finally, 1/3 of the staff must be trimmed. This process is already underway. SPRC, working in conjunction with the senior pastor, senior staff, and lay leaders, have worked on identifying the most important components of ministry so we can adequately staff those areas. Agreement has coalesced around the core activities we want to continue, which you heard. They are worship and music, children, youth, and family ministry, missions, and congregational care. Our resources will be supporting those ministries. What will this change mean? Things will need to be done differently. Where we have had staff in the past, we will now need to call upon you to assist us to do important work, much the way we do for the United Women in Faith, or UMW2, rummage sales. Please recognize the positive example you are to others by helping your church. You can inspire and encourage others to do likewise and ultimately bring glory to God through your actions. Matthew 5:16 says, "In the same way, let your light shine before people, so they can see the good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven. We ask you to take a few minutes at the conclusion of my remarks to fill out the interest and skills survey form you were given as you came in. These are areas where the church most needs your help. Feel free to keep the pens. I donated them. That's the new normal. What will success look like? Birmingham and Berkley First will continue to be one church with 2 campuses that works with synergy and symbiosis to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Rest assured, God is already working in our midst to help us get to our new normal. Our very own Pastor Susie was recently promoted by Bishop Bard to become the lead pastor at Birmingham Big Beaver UMC in Troy beginning on July 1. What a blessing to her and to her new congregation. Many of you have asked me if we're getting a new pastor. Due to constrained resources, the position will not be replaced and duties will be reassigned or eliminated. Pastor Charles promised us that we would expand and strengthen congregational care to ensure members of all ages are cared for. The ministry will be done at no cost to the operating budget this year. 2 generous grants for congregational care have been made. An endowment fund payment with a step down over 3 years will pay for this position. The search is well underway, and SPRC hopes to have an announcement soon. I have another important piece of news to share with you. Reverend George Wiegba, an ordained minister of 31 years with the United Methodist Church, will come to us in May to spend a 1-year sabbatical with us. He will live in the parsonage on Pleasant Street, and a $20,000 stipend from the endowment committee will cover his expenses. We're also looking for a car, so if you have a used car, please let us know. I visited with Dr. Wiegba twice over video phone chats. He has so much energy and enthusiasm for ministry. He plans to preach, teach, visit parishioners, and speak to small and large organizations and journey groups. Describing himself, Dr. Wiegba said, "My calling is to preach and teach the gospel of Jesus Christ by living out and teaching it with creativity and conviction." We are blessed to have Dr. Wiegba coming to us. When God closes a door, he always opens a window. We're challenged by having a smaller budget than we would like to have had, but with your help, we can continue to accomplish many important ministries. You are a passionate people with talents and experience who are committed to doing God's work. With your help, we will ensure 200 more years of ministry at Birmingham and Berkley First. Thank you for all that you have done and will continue to do. God bless. Please take a few minutes to fill out the sheets we gave you. We will collect them at the end of tonight's town hall. Thank you.
Good evening. A couple of words. Never touch the mic, ever. I've been in enough services where people have done that and suddenly had problems that don't do it. Trustees, I don't have a lot of comments, but I think there may be some questions that I want to try to preemptively answer. So many of you may have worked in businesses or have a business, and you would recognize that your operations are separate from your capital. Capital is used for maintaining things like our properties, our church buildings, our parsonages, those types of things, and it is completely separate from the operating budget. The capital funds come to us through the stewardship campaign in the line item that is home fires, as Don described. What you would maybe be aware of when you're thinking of various funds that are available in the church, there is a specific home fires fund that is an investment fund that is managed by our investment committee that allows us to be prepared for a catastrophic situation. If we were to have a tree break the roof here in the sanctuary, we would need to be on that and repairing it immediately in order to continue to worship in this place. If the boiler were to break in the middle of winter and we needed to replace it immediately, we need to have those funds available. That is what the Home Fires Reserve Fund is for. It's something that was thought through probably 25 years ago, and people have generously contributed to home fires, recognizing that capital expenses are separate from operations. I spoke with many of you in December at our church conference about some of the changes that are going on with parsonages. As we are changing as a church, you would recognize that we maybe have more parsonages than we have pastors needing housing. As part of the move that I described in the December church conference, I shared that we were given an incredibly generous gift from the Erickson family to allow us to have a new and updated senior parsonage, and that we had intentions to sell the Cranbrook Cross parsonage when it was vacated. You might say, ooh, that means there'll be a big chunk of money and we can use that towards operations, right? Wrong. It's not just a decision by our church, it's actually in the Methodist discipline that the properties, while we hold title and manage them and are responsible for maintaining them, and trustees have a fiduciary responsibility to that, they are technically the property of the United Methodist Church. We must follow the discipline, and so the sale of the Cranbrook Cross parsonage does not go to the operating fund, it goes to Home Fires. And it allows us to continue to do the work that we need to do in order to maintain our church properties so that they're welcoming for worship and for people coming to our spaces, and also maintain housing that's appropriate for our clergy. So I wanted to make sure that those questions were out there and answered, because I can see a lot of numbers turning in people's heads out there on how do we manage to operate in a slightly different budget form than what we've operated in previous years. If you have additional questions about trustees, I'm happy to answer those when we get to the coffee hour afterwards.
My name is Eric Freeberg, and I am the brand new chair of the Endowment Board. The Endowment Board, as we discussed earlier, oversees the general endowment and the named endowment funds. And as previously mentioned in the slides you saw, those funds combine to produce approximately $250,000 in annual revenue support for ministry and mission. And the purpose of the general endowment in our bylaws is to generate a fund or funds for use by this congregation to meet ministry and mission needs not included in the operating budget, and to provide a continuous educational program to encourage and inform our membership of the opportunities for endowment giving through donations, bequests, memorials, and gifts. And it is because of the generosity of all our members and our investment practices that the general endowment continues to grow. And as such, the endowment and finance committees, as mentioned earlier, are discussing ways to increase the amount of revenue it can generate for the church without risking that donated principal. We'll be working this spring with the endowment board on reviewing proposed amendments to the endowment documents with the goal of bringing a proposed amendments to a special church conference, possibly as soon as July. So many thanks to all of you who have generously and faithfulness that make this endowment possible. And if you'd like more information on endowment, if you haven't seen it, the endowment newsletter or the endowment annual report, I don't have copies, but it's all available on firstlegacy.org with more details that we probably don't want to discuss all tonight. Thank you.
So I'm Mary Jane Russell, and I am one of your lay leaders here at Birmingham and Berkley First. And in one of the many meetings that we had over what seems like an eternity now, I made the mistake of making a comment at the end of the meeting and got elected to do the closing. So I've had the privilege of serving on all these committees with the exception of endowment as part of my responsibility as lay leader. My husband and I joined this church over 28 years ago, and at that time it was under the senior pastor leadership of our own famous Reverend Dr. Bill Ritter. I became a Stephen minister and then a Stephen leader, walking with folks through difficult times in their lives. When I joined this church, I promised to support the church with my prayers, my presence, my gifts, and my service. So somewhere along the line, later on, the greater church decided to add an addendum to what I promised, and it included witness. I'm okay with that. So I would like to explore with you my commitment. Prayers. There have been many times in my life when all I could do was pray. Pray to petition God for what my needs were and to thank God for all that He has done to shepherd me through my life. Prayer is an essential part of my being, and I need that constant communication that keeps me centered in my life, how I communicate with others, and how I receive the grace of God to endure life challenges. I pray for this congregation, for guidance and direction, for leaders in decision-making, for our clergy, that they might help us to understand our purpose and be a constant source for listening and guidance. Presence. If I didn't show up in this sacred space, then I am cheating myself out of your fellowship and your ability to share your faith with me. We learn and we grow from each other when we share ministry by serving on committees, being in leadership roles, being a part of something that is greater than ourselves. We all need to be present for each other because we never know when we need our hand held or when someone else needs to hold our hand. The old saying that if you got it and you want to get in it, and I would say, and if you believe in it, you need it to win. This holds true for our church. So gifts. We are a blessed congregation with members with lots of experience in many different areas of expertise. You may be a teacher, a lawyer, an IT person, an engineer, a social worker, a finance person, a strategic planner. It goes on and on. Your skills are valuable not only in earning a living, but also in serving your church. You know what you excel in, and you know what you can do to help our church. You give your monies to support the work and mission of the church. I believe we gather here because we love God. I believe we stay here because we need each other. We are better together as we unite around a church that has positioned itself to go out into the mission field. Service. We have elected and commissioned leaders. We have committee members and church staff that help us to carry out our work. We are capable of turning things around when times get lean and more is required of us. I have seen and heard the conversation around hours of discussion of how best to manage our direction under today's circumstances. We are grateful for past leadership and for those who have given hours of time and expertise. But we're especially grateful tonight for those who are currently devoting themselves to the task before us. I have never been more encouraged or excited about how the leaders have stepped up, and the energy in the meeting rooms that we are in explodes with enthusiasm. You can't help but feel the hope for us moving forward. This is why we are here tonight. Look around you. Look at the people that support you. You are loved by God, the God that created all of us. Keep the light and love of God beaming. Everyone is needed. Find your gifts. Show up. Pitch in. Pray for the church and for each other. Oh, that witness thing. If we renew our vows tonight to uphold it by our prayers, our presence, our gifts, and our service, you're well on your way to acing the thing about the witness part. These vows, church, are not multiple choice. These vows are the light for each of us into the world. Let our witness be renewed tonight as we continue our faith and be the church that God has called us to be. Thank you.
We're going to open up for questions now, and if you have a 3x5 card, we'll send people down the center aisle and pick it up until we get those going. If somebody's got questions they want to stand up and ask, we'll get it to the right party, and hopefully we'll get it answered. Yeah. Go ahead and, until we get the 3x5 cards, go ahead and ask it.
You shared about the revenue and the cost, and I appreciate it. It's super transparent. Could you give us some idea of how the numbers in the church have developed over the last 5 years? I'm not involved. No, not right. Okay.
I can, yeah, I think your question was.
Check.
Can you go over how the numbers of the last 5 years have impacted the church? I mean, what we've really seen is we've seen giving hold pretty steady over the last 5 years, and we've seen a lot of inflation in our expenses. And so, we haven't seen the increase in the giving as we've seen the increase in the expenses. So a lot of it's just, our gas bill's up, our electric bill's up. Last year was the first time in, I think, 3 years that we gave 4% raise across the staff. So it increased the expenses there. But, you can't expect people to come in and do the work without getting some rewards. So, but our expense, it's the inflation that's really hurting the church. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. Could you actually give the numbers of participating parishioners in our parish, and then how many number of people are actually giving?
Yeah, we had I can give you for 2022 and 2023. In 2022, we had 430 giving families, and it was $2.1 million of giving in that. In 2023, we had 401 giving families for the general fund, and it was $1,966,000. Larry.
Don, the presentations by each and every one of you, outstanding. Just gives me a good feeling of we're going to win. The thought is that December seems to be the crowning month of the year in many ways. Income and response to that income spend. I'm wondering if someone has taken a look at the month of December and exploded just out to a new dimension, to a new width, to a new dynamic. If December is such a giving month and everybody is involved and the response to that involvement is over the top, it seems to me that I'd want to take that month, really look at it, dissect it, and figure out what more can we do in December. Second thought, I'm really concerned about the attitude here at this church, which seems to be moving forward. But I don't know if it's being galvanized by all of us. That is, are we here with an opportunity to explore and exploit that new feeling that we've had over the past year, particularly with this gentleman over here as our leader? We talk a lot about the goodwill that is being generated recently. And yet, I just wonder if maybe there's an opportunity, and we could call it, for lack of a better term, the group of 24. If the group of 24, and no limitation on really the actual number of participants, but if the group of 24 could take what's been going on recently and just build on that, I would love to see that effort made. Thank you.
I think there are some questions up here, so we'll turn to Karen.
While you're there, Don, before you go, most of the question, well, a lot of the questions on apportionments. Okay. What's the position on paying our apportionments? And very specifically, a question, several years ago, our apportionments were $200,000, and where are we now on apportionments?
Okay. This church has always paid its apportionments in full. It takes pride in doing that. And, the guidance has been that we're going to continue to pay our apportionments. In 2023, it was a little bit shy. Our apportionments were, I think, ended up being $395,000 was the apportionments that we paid, which is a substantial amount of money, I think. For 2024, our apportionments are $312,000. We do know that we budgeted $298,000 when we did the peanut butter spread of how we got it back. We cut that back by about $14,000 because that's what that portion of it was. But the church is still committed to somehow that we're going to try to pay that full apportionment, because that's really important for the church to pay the full apportionments.
So still for you, Don, and I'm not sure that we have this number, what kind of return does the church receive on our investments?
Rob.
Rob.
Have that one.
I don't know if you're prepared to answer that, Rob, but I'm bringing you the mic.
It obviously, excuse me, varies from year to year. 2022 was a very difficult year. 2023 kind of offset that. So between those 2 years, there really wasn't any gain in the investments because that's kind of how the entire investment universe worked for those 2 years. I don't have the numbers obviously in front of me. 2024, we're off to a good start. We would expect overall on an annual average basis to earn anywhere from probably 6 to 8% over the long term, I would say. We don't take an outsized amount of risk with those investments, so we're not trying to hit home runs. We're trying to kind of hit singles and doubles. But that's kind of I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Larry, I want to come back to your first question on the month of December and the goodwill and how it was. It is a challenge when we look at that. I mean, Brady Erickson used to tell me, you got to look at December as maybe 2 months, you know, and we had pleas. Charles talked about it at the Charge Conference. Russ Ives did an outstanding job in November getting up in front of the congregation, talking about the financial position we were in. To give you an idea, we brought in over $600,000 in the month of December. That's better than we did in the second quarter or the third quarter. So in 1 month, we brought in $1 million totally in the fourth quarter, which really helped us out. I don't know how we can get any better at that because, we really balance the budget based on what people pledge. And when people go above the pledge, we're very grateful for it. But I don't know what someone's going to write a check in the 28th of December for $50,000 or give $50,000 of stock. I mean, that it comes in and it's very grateful we get it. It helps us out. But I don't know how we can, do it unless we ask people to give it to us earlier in the year and then that. So I don't know how we address that, Larry.
Don. All I'm trying to do with that sentiment is to say that the numbers speak for themselves. December is really a decisive month. And it seems to me that taking that in account and going forward with all of the brain power that you have with your organization, with your committee members, with your leaders, there's probably ways that have not been explored yet to take December and go forward even further. And I don't know what that is. But I'd like to have you consider that, please.
Yeah, we have talked about changing our year end in November 30th and starting out December as the new year. But there's pros and cons of that too. So we have talked about it a lot. I don't know, we haven't figured it out yet. Let me just leave it at that.
Before you disappear, a couple questions on the reserves. So a question says, when and where was the reserve created, and what was it at its maximum? And another question says, how did it get depleted, and we didn't notice or do anything about it before now?
The reserve was, okay, let me explain what reserves are, and I'll try to make it so that you can relate to it pretty easily. We have a balance sheet, and think of it as your savings account at home. And there's money in there. So when we have a negative year, money comes out of the savings account and gets paid. And it might be $100,000 this year or another $100,000, or last year it was over $200,000. So it came off the balance sheet and it got spent. It'd be the same way with your own personal, that you want to keep a floor in your checking account of $1,000, and 2 months in, you're down to $10 in your checking account. So what do? You go to your savings and pull some money out and put it back $1,000 in your savings. Well, your savings is now down $1,000. Same thing happens at church. And we had like $1.2 million, $1.3 million in the bank. At one point last summer, we were down to, we were talking in the finance committee that we really needed to keep 3 months of expenses in the bank at all times. It's really probably the best practice to do that. So that would be about $600,000. And we were down to about $225,000 at one point last summer, which the summer is our low point. I mean, our people don't attend church, people are on vacation. And so Frank and I were talking quite often, trying to talk about how we were managing the cash flows. So I hope that question answers that. I think Frank, what's the balance sheet right now at? About $670,000. So there's about $670,000 right now in the bank.
Okay, this one is a question and a recommendation, and it's around technology that makes giving easier, Square, Venmo, those types of things. And as a church, and a suggestion here for rummage sale as well, are we looking at those new modern payment techniques to make giving easier for especially the younger generations?
Okay, Sharon's going to take that one.
As a slightly younger person, yes. There is a small group coming together to look at how can we use things like Cash App and Venmo and things that like my generation and my children's generation definitely feel is the way that they should pay and give and use their money. Let's be real. Those of you who have people in their 20s in your circle, they don't have a checkbook. They don't even know how to write a check. It's not something they do. My children look at my checkbook and say, "Mom, you're an old head." If we don't embrace that kind of technology and get real about making it easy to scan a code and give right away, we are losing the ability to engage younger givers. If you want them to write a check, they don't even have a checkbook. There are many apps out there that are specifically church focused. We want to make sure that they're secure and appropriate and ideally connected to the systems that we already use here at the church for managing our accounts and our giving. So technology underway, and I got to give a shout out to Adam Deal. He's the new head of our technology committee, and he knows that's on his list for this year.
Before you disappear, here's a question for you. Specifically has your name in it, Sharon. You mentioned that the sale of Cranbrook Cross will support home fires, the utilities and maintenance cost, but isn't that just offsetting the land contract for the new parsonage?
Okay. Let me break that down in 3 ways.
Yep.
Yes, we have a land contract that we need to satisfy for the Chesterfield Parsonage Exchange. That money that we would receive from the sale of Cranbrook Cross will cover that land contract. Home Fires does not pay the utilities. So that's a subtle thing that some of you maybe know or maybe missed. But when you're looking at the buildings and grounds costs in the operating budget, those are things like electricity, gas, water, those types of things. Those are covered by the operating budget. When we sell Cranbrook Cross, we anticipate the sale price for that will exceed what our land contract responsibility is, which is $460,000, as I mentioned in the beginning of December. The excess funds from that will go back into the Home Fires Reserve and will replenish some of the things that we're needing to do in other places, like we need a new floor in the youth center, and that will probably be a $75,000 party down there. When you're thinking about the various places that the money goes, just remember that as much as that would be, it would be great if all of that money was coming back to Home Fires, we do have to settle that particular bit. If you're thinking about the operating budget, what's the offset of selling Cranbrook Cross to the operating budget? I asked Don to check that out. Frank did some numbers. Not having to pay gas, electric, cable, water, sewer, trash collection, all those things for Cranbrook Cross. It's less than $20,000 a year, but it's another $20,000 that will help the operating budget.
Thank you.
Any more from me?
That's it for you for right now. Donna, let's finish up with a couple for finance before we move on. So. No, so actually we've got some great ideas here for raising revenue, and so I've got some great suggestions here. What are we doing to create income? Somebody says the land itself is valuable. Can we have birthday parties in the CLC? Can we have summer camps? Can we charge more for programming that we have? And along the same line, what can we do to start to think outside the box for raising funds? A variety night for music, kind of like a talent show. I don't know who wrote this. Doris on organ and my husband on the electric guitar. So we've got volunteers here. We've got volunteers. A family dance, those kind of creative ideas. So.
They're all great ideas. We got to evaluate them. We got to work with the trustees to make sure that we're using the buildings in the proper way and that we're covered from an insurance perspective. And we'll take all those ideas and start working.
There's a question here. I don't know if anybody on the panel has the numbers to respond to this question. What are the Sunday school numbers now versus in the past? Do we have any participation numbers available off the top of our head tonight?
Kim, do you have that number off the top of your head?
Oh, okay. Right now, we offer Sunday school at 9:30 in the morning. We have 4 classrooms from preschool through 5th grade. And on average, we have about 10 to 12 kids per classroom. It can go up, depending on the time of the year, to about 15 to 18, but it also can be smaller. The average that we're seeing in America, not just here, is that people come to worship once or twice a month, so kids are coming to Sunday school once or twice a month. And so it's always a different group of kids coming and going to class.
Would you like more teachers?
Yes. Yeah. Sunday school numbers for middle school and high school are very similar to what Kim is seeing. We have anywhere from 10 to 15 kids every Sunday. Like Kim, they're different. It's that same pattern of maybe they come twice a month right now. Currently, I just have 1 classroom for middle school and high school. The numbers this year have increased since last year.
And at Berkeley, the children's Sunday school has about 35 on a given Sunday, and youth group meets Sunday nights with about a dozen students. But same kind of thing, right? It's not the same kids every time.
Thank you, everyone. Don, this might be for you as well. Why have we not had a whole congregation meeting asking about increases in pledging and giving?
So if I heard that question right, Karen, it was, why didn't we have a full congregation meeting, ask for increases in pledging and giving?
Why have we not had a whole congregation meeting asking for increase in pledges? Yeah.
I kind of thought we did during the giving campaign, and we've talked about it probably every Sunday in October and November, that it was the stewardship campaign, estimate of giving, and to get people to give their cards. And I think we did have in January, a discussion of where we ended the year at from the stewardship giving. I don't know, we probably got to revamp how we communicate so that everybody feels comfortable that they're getting the current information on the stewardship campaign.
Yeah, I think tonight's meeting is our first attempt to have those open communications with the congregation about the status of the church and where we're at. So I expect to hear more on the financial status of the church.
Well, Karen, I would contend most of the people here are givers. The ones that don't talk aren't givers.
Yeah, yep.
The reason we need to use the mic is that we are live streaming, and we may hear you, but online they wouldn't hear you without this. So
No, my point is those of us, I'm making an assumption, we're here and we are probably the primary givers, and the ones that we're not reaching, I think all of us, our jaws dropped on the number of the active role and the number of giving families. We need to address the delta that probably aren't here.
And to follow up on that, Melinda, that's something that you'll see we'll be working on through the stewardship campaign. When we said we're trying to increase participation and effectiveness, it's really how do we reach out, how do we connect with those non-givers today, or non-pledgers, because the pledge is important and helps us plan the programming. All right, I think we're on to Melissa now. I'll throw you a softball first.
Okay, thanks.
What's the future of the CLC?
We are hoping very much to continue what we're doing. Sarah has worked at such a wonderful job of getting that going, and pickleball is doing so well, and there are yoga classes and all different kinds of things going on. And we have every intention of continuing to work that with volunteers. You've built a wonderful team, and we want to keep that going. So we have no plan to abandon that. It's just going to be perhaps not having staff lead it in the way that has happened in the past.
And then I've got a multi-part question here about Pastor Susie.
Okay.
Who's going to do Pastor Susie's job? What parts of it are being eliminated? And why was Pastor Susie not tapped for the congregational care role?
Yeah. Oh, call it the big gun.
They got the big gun.
Well, a part of the question is confidential staff parish work. Other parts of it I'm going to attempt to answer. In the United Methodist Church, all ordained clergy are itinerant, meaning we move from place to place. We don't determine where we move to. It's a covenant in the clergy community, and the bishop is the enforcer of that. So we are not free unless the bishop sends Susie back to us to assign her at Birmingham First. Pastoral appointments are yearly. So when you have had a pastor for 10 years or 16 or 20 years, that pastor has been appointed 12 or 16 or 20 times yearly. Susie, Pastor Susie, is an outstanding pastor. Amen. Yes. Yeah. And when I came to Birmingham First 2 years ago, 2 years already, almost, there were people in the district who said, why was Reverend Boyu not kept here for his last year? We are in an itinerant system. We have a shortfall of clergy in the Michigan Conference. All of our churches are likely not to get a pastor this year. The cabinet is feverishly recruiting from out of state to fill the pulpits of the conference. And that has played a key role in Pastor Susie being asked to lead one of our congregations rather than be an associate here at Birmingham First. And we are working to find someone to lead congregational care. And even that work is hard. We are having difficulty in finding clergy. So pray for us, pray for the Michigan Conference and all of the congregations, because as important as Birmingham First is and Berkley First is, every church in Michigan is equally important in the economy of God. And that's part of the reason. We are in this together, all 600 congregations across our conference. So we give and we receive. I hope this is helpful without going into details that I know I cannot go into. Yes.
Thank you, Pastor Charles. All right, as I turn the cards over to consider it done, somebody had wrote a question on the back of a card. Is the finance question done? I'll try to take it unless you want to jump in. The question is, how are we going to increase or rebuild our reserves?
We're going to try to manage to a balanced budget, and if we come in over this year, we'll put money back in the reserves. And it's going to take. They didn't get spent down overnight. It's not going to take us. We're not going to get them built back up in 1 year. We're going to have to put some money back in the reserves. Cumulatively since 2019, we spent almost $300,000, $400,000 over what we took in. And we're not gonna be able to stick that all back in the bank overnight. It's gonna take us a number of years. But it's key that we build that back up so we have a reserve and we have a cushion to run and pay our bills.
Thank you. All right, Melissa, I saved the doozy for last. This card simply says, expand on the 30% staff cut, please.
As Charles was saying with the other comment, all of this is confidential. We have to roll it out. We have a plan in place. We're working on it, and you will see in the near future what it is. I'm not at liberty to say right now what it is. I would say we have examined everything extremely carefully and spent a lot of time on it, and we are trying to be as good about that as we can be, and if you have anything to say, please go ahead.
And I think SPRC is aiming for the end of this month to unveil the cuts, the adjustments in one whole piece. There's still some fine tuning going on as we speak. With staff cuts, we are dealing with people, as you know, their commitment to the work of God, which is immense here. It is a shame that we have to do this, but it is our fiduciary obligation to live within those means, and I'm hopeful that this year will be a year of recalibration and we can come back stronger next year. The staff are under a difficult pressure right now. Pray for each of us, all the staff, because these are great people who are participating in a great experiment in God's grace. And I believe that by God's grace, wherever the dust settles, people will be okay because God has got the whole world in God's hands, including you, me, and all. SPRC is working hard, and we want to unveil all of this as one major piece together, hopefully by the end of the month.
I think all of us realize that COVID made a huge difference in the lives of all of us individually and as a church. And certainly we still feel some of those effects. But I simply want to commend all of these committees that are working so hard to address things directly and their courage in sharing it with us. Because sometimes we've tried to make it better, but we haven't always been as open about it. And I think I said back in November that you can't be a part of the solution if you don't know there's a problem. And so I'm grateful to the leadership that is sharing this with us, helping us to become part of the solution by being aware of the problem. And I also encourage that we continue through the year with keeping the congregation aware of how we are progressing. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. All right, we had scheduled a closing at 8:30 today, so we're a little bit ahead of time. Are there any other final questions or comments from I see a hand up here.
Sorry, you guys mentioned CLC, so we all know I'm going to talk about this. We mentioned pickleball. Pickleball is one of the organic incomes that we've created, and we thought that we were going to do well. What we've done is about 150% above what we had projected. So I think it's the big, thank you. No, I was going to say, this is like, I see George who plays pickleball. I hear Melinda who is a cheerleader for it. Everyone has been very positive about it. And I look forward to seeing us find other opportunities. Little concerned with the HR statement that the CLC's running great and we're going to look at staff, because we run on volunteers, and we run a lot of those people. A lot of the time are our volunteers for other things also. There's Anne, who obviously volunteers for a lot of things. There's Nancy, Judy, Margaret. Everyone is doing a lot of the volunteer work. So I think we're more than willing to volunteer in this church, but we also need to have that staff resource, and we also need to have that person who's going to push to help us get what we need. And that's my biggest concern continuing forward.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, Charles, I think it's on you for closing prayer.
If you will bear with me before I pray, I want to say a word or two. Not a sermon. That's coming Sunday. Many years ago, there was a controversy in the early church. And the Roman Emperor Constantine funded the Council of Nicaea to seek to resolve that controversy. The Council of Nicaea's final declaration has made its way through history into our worship book, the Nicene Creed. The controversy was a very persuasive rhetorician of a preacher in the Roman Empire with the name Arius began to convincingly and intellectually say that Jesus Christ couldn't possibly have been God or the Son of God, because God cannot die. And if Jesus is God, then what happened to God for the 3 days that Jesus was dead? Did God die? No, God cannot die. Therefore, Jesus couldn't be God. And those who depend purely and solely on an intellectual faith began to believe Arius' preaching. And it began to gain following and steam. It bothered the mothers and the fathers of the early church to have a gospel contrary to the one handed down to us. And the emperor, who himself needed some political base, funded the Council of Nicaea so that the leaders of the church would resolve that issue, hopefully once and for all. And at that meeting, after all kinds of arguments, the decision was made to follow the advice of Bishop Augustine, who stood up in the well of that council and made a clear apology for who Jesus is and why Jesus is God. He is God of God, true light of true light, begotten, not created. And each of those lines means a lot into what has become the universal church. The proponent of that ideology was banished from the church, but never stopped preaching. Tonight, we are blessed to be called and chosen to be here tonight, online and in person. And some who can be neither online or in person tonight are with us in prayer. For a great congregation is sorting through its future. As Larry indicated in his powerful comment a few moments earlier tonight, we will win. We will win because God will win. We will win because God needs light to shine in the darkness. And that God has assembled some of America's best right here at Birmingham and Berkley First. We will win. No doubt about it. I suspect that gatherings like these happened 150 years ago and 200 years ago in this congregation as members labored over what shall the future of this congregation be. They probably didn't imagine that you would be here today seeking to extend their legacy and their witness into the future. An expectant world, a thirsty world, a hungry world waits for the whole creation waits with eager longing for the sons and daughters of God to be revealed. And that revelation begins tonight. You know perhaps a little bit more than you knew before. And we owe it to each other for every single member to be counted in. Please go from this place prayerful, present, giving, serving, and witnessing to the true gospel of Christ that brings transformation to the world. And to every staff person, every clergy, and every member, let's hold together no matter what. Because God is doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? No one here is trying to do anything against anyone here. I believe that because of tonight and other nights that may follow, this congregation will be resurgent, resilient, healthier, and stronger because the world needs us to follow Jesus. I want to thank this amazing group of leaders who are doing the job you elected them to do. And as your senior pastor, I'm committed to every member who wishes to step up to do so and to make your witness. Someone spoke passionately and truthfully about the other members who we are not hearing from. It's part of our job, my job, to seek them out, find them, and hear from them. I believe the law of God and the law of the church, maybe something needs to be addressed. And part of our ministry is to find out what needs to be addressed and address them. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for the spirit that you brought here and that you will leave with. And most importantly, from your senior pastor, thank you for what you are about to do. And may God receive those gifts and multiply them to God's great glory. I'd like us to stand for a moment and sing maybe one stanza of one of the popular hymns of the church. And I have a number of them, but I want someone out there to shout a popular hymn that you think we can sing without even the hymnal. And we will sing a cappella. Oh, Doris is here, you know. What did you say, Mary? And what's the title of that? Great is thy faithfulness. Why don't we just sing all of it like Methodists? Will you please rise and turn to hymn number 140, and our singing will be our benediction tonight. Thank you to our leaders. Ask Sharon to come up because she is a great example of Christian faithfulness. She's standing here in a week that her husband is fighting for his life. Great faithfulness. Kate Wilcox is here tonight while her husband has just had surgery this morning. And I think the same could be said about each one of you. Because of your faithfulness, we will do this. Thanks be to God. And I thank all of our leaders for their leadership in this church. Thank you. Go in peace, and may the peace of God go and remain with you always. Amen.